Captain Jake Morrison watched in horror as the blue planet burned below him. His cargo ship, the New Horizon, hung in space far from the battle, but even from this distance he could see the orange flames spreading across the surface of Altara Prime. The Valkyrie had come again. Jake had heard stories about these monsters for years. Every trader in the galaxy knew about them. They were tall, with hard shells like giant bugs. Their ships looked like living creatures, all curves and spikes, and they never stopped. For 300 years, they had been taking over worlds, one by one. "Captain, we should leave," said his co-pilot, a young woman named Amy. Her hands shook as she watched the destruction. "If they see us..." Jake nodded. Amy was right. The Valkyrie killed anyone who got in their way. But he could not look away from the planet. The Altarians had been good people. They built beautiful cities made of crystal that sang in the wind. They had never hurt anyone. Now those cities were breaking apart under the enemy's guns. On the planet's surface, the Valkyrie soldiers moved like a black wave. Jake had seen pictures of them before. They were 7 feet tall with 6 arms and shells harder than steel. Their eyes glowed red, and they made clicking sounds when they talked to each other. But the worst part was how they moved together, like parts of one giant machine. The Altarians tried to fight back. Their ships shot bright blue beams at the attackers. Their soldiers used weapons that could cut through metal. But it did not matter. The Valkyrie kept coming, and there were too many of them. Jake turned away from the window. "Set course for Kepler Station," he told Amy. "Maximum speed." The New Horizon jumped to light speed, leaving the dying world behind. 3 days later, Jake sat in a bar on Kepler Station. The place was full of refugees and traders, all talking about the same thing. The Valkyrie were getting stronger. They had taken 50 worlds this year alone. "I heard they ate the Altarian children," said a drunk Corvan at the next table. The Corvans looked like bears with gray fur and yellow eyes. This one had scars on his face from old battles. "That is just a story," replied his friend, another trader Jake knew. "But they did take all the adults for slaves, worked them to death in their mines." Jake drank his beer and tried not to listen, but the words kept coming. "The coalition is finished," someone said. "The last free worlds will fall within a year." "Where can we run?" asked another voice. "They own everything now." Jake finished his drink and left. Outside the bar, the station's corridors were full of scared people, families with all their belongings in bags, children crying, old people sitting on the floor, too tired to move. This was what the galaxy looked like now, always running, always afraid. But Jake had heard other stories too. Whispers about a place where the Valkyrie had never gone. A part of space so far away that even their ships could not reach it. Some people said there were humans there, but Jake had never seen one. Most people thought humans were just a myth. Far from Kepler Station, in a secret place among the stars, Admiral Lisa Carter read the reports from her spies. She sat in her office on a hidden base that the enemy could never find. On her desk were pictures of destroyed worlds and dead civilizations. Lisa was 50 years old with gray hair and cold blue eyes. She had been watching the Valkyrie for 30 years, learning everything about them. She knew how they fought, how they thought, and most important, how they could be beaten. "Admiral," said her assistant, Lieutenant Bob Taylor. He was young and nervous, with brown hair and glasses. "The council wants to see you." Lisa nodded and walked to the meeting room. Inside, 12 other humans sat around a table. These were the leaders of humanity's hidden colonies. They had kept their people safe by staying invisible. But now they faced a choice that would change everything. Dr. Ben Rogers was already talking when Lisa entered. He was a thin man with wild hair who spent all his time studying alien biology. On the table in front of him was a glass case with something dark and wet inside. "This is a piece of Valkyrie brain tissue," Ben said. "I have been studying it for 5 years, and I found something amazing." He touched a button and a picture appeared on the wall. It showed millions of tiny threads connecting brain cells. "The Valkyrie are not just working together," Ben explained. "They share one mind. Every soldier, every worker, every ship captain is connected to every other one. That is why they never make mistakes. Why they never fight each other, why they always win. We know this already, said Council Leader Steve Mitchell. He was an old soldier with white hair and tired eyes. What is your point? Ben smiled. Their strength is also their weakness. Because they all think the same way, they cannot handle surprise, they cannot deal with chaos. And humans, we are very good at chaos. Lisa looked at the other council members. Some seemed interested, others looked afraid. You want us to fight them, said Dr. Carol Green, the head of human science. 300 worlds have tried. They all lost. Because they fought like the Velkari expected, Ben replied. Big fleets against big fleets, order against order. But humans fight differently. We think differently. We can do things that their shared mind cannot predict or understand. Council Leader Mitchell stood up. Even if you are right, we have 30 million people in our colonies. They have trillions of soldiers. The numbers do not work. Numbers only matter if you fight the same kind of war, Lisa said. She had been quiet until now, but everyone listened when she spoke. I have been planning for this day for 10 years. We do not need to match their strength. We just need to break their mind. She pressed a button, and new pictures filled the wall. Ships that looked nothing like the curved Velkari designs. Weapons that worked in ways the enemy had never seen. Battle plans that made no sense to anyone who thought in straight lines. The galaxy is dying, Lisa continued. Every day, more worlds fall, more people become slaves. Soon, there will be nowhere left to hide. We can stay safe for a few more years, but then they will find us too. The room was quiet. Outside the windows, stars twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere among those stars, billions of people waited for someone to save them. All in favor of revealing humanity to the galaxy? Mitchell asked. One by one, hands went up around the table. Not all of them, but enough. Lisa looked out at the stars and thought about Jake Morrison and all the other people running from world to world with nowhere left to go. Soon they would learn that they were not alone. Soon the Velkari would learn that the galaxy had a new player. And this time, the rules were about to change. 3 months after the fall of Altara Prime, Commander Alex Turner stood on the bridge of the Iron Will. The human ship was unlike anything else in the galaxy. Where other races built their ships with smooth curves or sharp angles, human ships looked rough and practical. They were made for fighting, not for looking pretty. Alex was 35 years old with short black hair and green eyes. He had been a soldier all his adult life, but he had never fought aliens before. Today, that would change. Theta Prime is ahead, sir, said his navigation officer, Lieutenant Jane Harris. She was young and smart, one of the best pilots in the human fleet. I can see the battle from here. Alex looked at the main screen. The planet Theta Prime hung in space like a brown and green ball. Around it, hundreds of ships were fighting. The coalition forces were losing badly. Their white and silver ships were exploding one by one under the attack of the dark Velkari vessels. Orders, sir? Asked Lieutenant Sam Davis, the weapons officer. Sam was a big man with red hair who loved a good fight. Take us to invisible mode, Alex ordered. Get us close to the enemy fleet. The Iron Will had technology the Velkari had never seen. Human scientists had spent decades developing ways to hide from enemy sensors. The ship faded from view like a ghost. On the planet below, General Maya Brooks was having the worst day of her life. She was a Korvan, one of the bear-like people who made up most of the coalition army. Her gray fur was burned from explosions, and her yellow eyes were tired from 3 days of fighting. General, the east wall is breaking, reported one of her soldiers through the radio. The bugs are almost through. Maya cursed in her own language. The Velkari had been attacking the city for a week. Her people were brave, but they could not hold much longer. Pull everyone back to the center, she ordered. Start moving the civilians to the ships. But Maya knew there were not enough ships. Half the people would be left behind when the city fell. Above the planet, the Velkari fleet moved in perfect formation. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship was. They attacked together like fingers on a hand. Their commander, war leader Zakthos, felt satisfied through the shared mind of his race. Another world would fall today. Another victory for the great empire. Then something impossible happened. A new ship appeared in the middle of the Velkari fleet. It was smaller than their warships, but it moved fast and struck hard. Blue energy beams shot out from its weapons, cutting through Velkari armor like it was paper. What is that? Zakthos clicked in surprise. The shared mind of his fleet was confused. This ship did not match any known coalition design. On the Iron Will, Alex watched his weapons tear apart the enemy ships. "Target their command vessel," he told Sam. "Yes, sir," Sam replied with a grin. "This is too easy." The human weapons were different from anything the Velkari had faced. Instead of trying to overpower their thick armor, the beams found weak spots and exploited them. Human engineers had studied Velkari ships for years, learning every flaw. Within minutes, 5 enemy ships were destroyed. The rest of the Velkari fleet tried to surround the Iron Will, but the human ship was too fast. It dodged between their shots like a dancer, always moving, never staying still long enough to be hit. Down on Theta Prime, Maya could not believe what she was seeing. "Who is that?" she asked her communications officer. "Unknown ship, this is General Maya Brooks of the Coalition Defense Force," she broadcast. "Identify yourself." Alex's face appeared on the screen in Maya's command center. She had never seen a human before, but she could tell this was not any of the known races. His skin was pale, his hair was dark, and his eyes were a color she had never seen. "General Brooks, this is Commander Alex Turner of the Human Defense Force," he said. "We are here to help." "Human?" Maya repeated the word slowly. "I do not know this species." "You will," Alex replied. "All coalition forces, pull back from the battle. We will handle the enemy fleet." Maya was about to argue when she saw what happened next. The human ship did something that broke every rule of space combat. Instead of fighting the Velkari ships one at a time, it flew straight through the middle of their formation, firing in all directions. The Velkari tried to respond, but their shared mind could not process the chaos. They were used to orderly battles with clear plans. This human was fighting like a crazy person, doing things that made no sense. But it was working. War leader Zakthos felt pain and confusion through the hive mind. Half his fleet was gone, and he did not understand how. "All ships, focus fire on the unknown vessel," he ordered. The Velkari ships turned their weapons on the Iron Will. For a moment, space lit up with deadly energy. When the light faded, everyone expected to see wreckage. Instead, the human ship was still there, undamaged. "Impossible," Zakthos clicked. "Nothing can survive that much firepower." But Alex was smiling on his bridge. "Their turn," he said to Sam. "Fire everything." The Iron Will unleashed weapons the galaxy had never seen. Missiles that could think for themselves, energy beams that bent around obstacles, and something new, weapons that attacked the enemy's computers instead of their hulls. The Velkari ships began to lose control. Their perfect coordination broke down as their systems failed. Ships crashed into each other. Others spun helplessly through space. In 10 minutes, the entire enemy fleet was destroyed or disabled. Silence filled the space around Theta Prime. The coalition forces could not believe what they had just seen. The Velkari, who had conquered 90% of the galaxy, had been defeated by a single unknown ship. "This is Commander Turner to all coalition forces," Alex broadcast. "The battle is over. Begin rescue operations for any survivors." On the planet, Maya stared at the screen showing the human commander. "How?" was all she could manage to say. "We have been watching and learning for a long time, General," Alex replied. "The Velkari are not as strong as they think. They just never fought anyone who understood their weaknesses." Over the next few hours, human rescue ships appeared to help with the evacuation. They looked as strange as the Iron Will, practical and rough, built by people who cared more about what worked than what looked good. Dr. Kate Phillips was on one of these ships. She was a xenopsychologist, someone who studied how alien minds worked. Kate was small and quiet, with brown hair and kind eyes. Her job was to make first contact with the coalition survivors. "Hello," she said to Maya when they met face to face. "I am Dr. Kate Phillips. I study how different species think and feel. Maya looked down at the small human woman. Even sitting, the Korvan general was much bigger. Your people fight well, Maya said. But I do not understand how you won. Kate smiled. That is exactly why we won. The Velkari understand strength and technology, but they do not understand surprise and creativity. Humans are very good at both. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Sam Davis was leading a team to secure the planet's surface. They found Velkari soldiers who had been cut off from their ships. Without connection to the hive mind, the enemy warriors seemed lost and confused. Surrender, Sam called out to a group of them. The battle is over. The Velkari clicked and chittered to each other. They had never surrendered before. They did not even have words for giving up. But their ships were gone, and these strange new fighters had beaten them completely. Slowly, the alien soldiers put down their weapons. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. On every world, both free and enslaved, people heard the same impossible story. The Velkari had been defeated. Someone had actually beaten them in open combat. In the hidden human colonies, Admiral Lisa Carter read the reports with satisfaction. The first phase of her plan had worked perfectly. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the strongest way possible. But she knew this was just the beginning. The Velkari would not give up after one defeat. They would come back with more ships, more soldiers, more anger. Let them come, Lisa thought. They still did not understand what they were fighting. On Theta Prime, Alex Turner stood with Maya Brooks and the other coalition leaders. Around them, human and alien soldiers worked together to help the refugees. What happens now? Maya asked. Alex looked up at the stars, where more human ships were arriving every hour. Now we teach you how to fight back, and then we take this war to them. For the first time in 300 years, the galaxy had hope. Colonel Amy Stone looked at the training field and shook her head. After 2 weeks on Sanctuary, the liberated world that humans had turned into their main base, she was still amazed by what she saw every day. Korvan soldiers practiced hand-to-hand combat with Etherian healers. Altarian survivors learned to use human weapons alongside Nexari engineers. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were now fighting side by side. But teaching them to fight like humans was harder than she had expected. Amy was 42 years old with short blonde hair and scars on her arms from many battles. She had been a soldier for 20 years, but training aliens was a new challenge. No, 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 she called out to a group of Korvan warriors. Stop thinking so much, just react. The bear-like aliens looked confused. Their leader, Captain Tor Ironpaw, raised his massive hand. Colonel Stone, we do not understand. How can we fight without a plan? Amy sighed. This was the problem with every species in the coalition. They all thought fighting meant following rules and making plans. The Velkari had beaten them because the bugs were better at planning and following orders. Watch me, Amy said. She walked to the center of the training circle, where 3 combat robots waited. These machines were programmed to fight like Velkari soldiers. The robots attacked at the same time, moving in perfect coordination. But instead of meeting their charge head-on, Amy rolled to the side. She grabbed a piece of broken metal from the ground and threw it at one robot's sensors. While it was blinded, she attacked from behind. The second robot tried to help its partner, but Amy was already moving again. She slid under its weapons and hit the power switch on its back. The third robot came at her with all 6 arms swinging, but Amy jumped on a nearby box and kicked it in the head. All 3 robots were down in less than 30 seconds. The alien soldiers stared in amazement. Captain Tor clicked his teeth, which was how Korvans showed surprise. You did not follow any fighting pattern we know, he said. Exactly, Amy replied. Humans do not fight like you expect. We change plans in the middle of battle. We use whatever we can find as weapons. We do things that do not make sense to an enemy who thinks in straight lines. Across the base, Captain Kyle Adams was having similar problems with his students. He was trying to teach Korvan officers how to make decisions without asking permission from their commanders. Lieutenant Greypaw, Kyle said to a young Korvan, your unit is under attack. What do you do? The alien stood at attention. I request orders from my captain, sir. Kyle rubbed his forehead. But what if your captain is dead? What if the radio is broken? What if there is no time to ask? Lieutenant Greypaw looked uncomfortable. Then, I would follow the standard battle procedures in the manual? There is no manual for every situation, Kyle explained. Sometimes you have to think for yourself. Sometimes you have to make your own rules.
This idea scared the Corvins. They had been following orders for so long that thinking independently felt wrong. Meanwhile, Sergeant Rita Hayes was working with the Etherians, the peaceful blue-skinned people who had never wanted to fight anyone. They were the hardest students of all. "I cannot do this," said Healer Moonwhisper, dropping her training weapon. "Violence goes against everything my people believe." Rita knelt down next to the tall, thin alien. The Etherians were beautiful people with silver hair and large purple eyes. They could heal wounds with their touch, but they had never learned to cause them. "I understand," Rita said gently. "But the Velkari will not stop because you are peaceful. They will kill you and your children just the same." Moonwhisper's eyes filled with tears. "There must be another way." "Sometimes there is," Rita agreed. "But sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to fight for it. My own people learned this lesson many times in our history." High above the planet, Admiral Paul Newman commanded the growing human fleet from his flagship, the Liberty. Paul was 55 years old with gray hair and calm brown eyes. He had spent his whole career preparing for this war. The fleet around Sanctuary grew larger every day. Human ships arrived from the hidden colonies, bringing weapons and supplies. But more importantly, coalition ships came too. Ships full of soldiers who wanted to learn how to fight back. "Admiral," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Carol West, "we have confirmation from the Nexus system. The Velkari are gathering a large fleet there." Paul nodded. The enemy was not sitting still. They were preparing for a major counterattack. "How large?" he asked. "At least 500 ships, sir. Maybe more." Paul looked at the tactical display. The humans had 30 ships at Sanctuary. The coalition forces added another 20. They were badly outnumbered. But Paul was not worried. Numbers only mattered if you fought the kind of war the enemy expected. "Prepare the fleet for Operation Chaos," he ordered. Operation Chaos was Admiral Lisa Carter's plan for dealing with large enemy fleets. Instead of meeting them in a direct battle, human forces would split up and attack from many directions at once. They would hit supply lines, communication centers, and isolated ships. They would make the enemy fight 10 small battles instead of one big one. It was the kind of strategy that drove the Velkari crazy. Back on the surface, Dr. Tony Garcia was working with coalition historians to understand how the Velkari had conquered so much of the galaxy. Tony was a thin man with wild brown hair who loved studying old battles. "Look at this pattern," he said to his assistant, a young Altarian named Crystal Song. "Every species they fought tried to match their strength with strength." Crystal Song nodded her blue head. The Altarians were a proud people who had built beautiful crystal cities, but they had fallen to the Velkari just like everyone else. "The Corvans built bigger ships," Tony continued. "The Nexari made stronger weapons. The Etherians tried to use their psychic powers to break the hive mind. But they all fought the same way, order against order." "And humans fight differently?" Crystal Song asked. "Humans learn to fight chaos against order," Tony explained. "We learned this by fighting each other for thousands of years. We had wars where small groups beat large armies. We had battles where the wrong decision turned out to be the right one. We learned that sometimes the best plan is to have no plan at all." Far away in space, the Velkari High Command was meeting on their fortress world of Nexus Prime. Queen Warrior Zethkari led the discussion, her massive form towering over the other commanders. The Velkari were different from their soldiers. Where the common bugs were gray and mindless, the commanders were larger and smarter. Zethkari was 12 feet tall with purple armor and 4 bright red eyes. "Report on the humans," she commanded. War leader Zakthos, the survivor from Theta Prime, stepped forward. Half his face was covered in scars from the battle. "They are unlike any species we have faced, my queen. Their ships move in patterns we cannot predict. Their weapons target our weaknesses instead of our strengths." "Weakness is not possible," clicked another commander. We are the perfect species. We have conquered the galaxy. Not all of it, Zethkari said quietly. The room fell silent. These humans come from somewhere we have never been. They have learned things we do not know. She turned to her science advisor, a smaller Velkari with many instruments attached to his shell. What have you learned about their biology?
They are weak individually, the scientist reported. No shells, no natural weapons, short lives. But they work together without a hive mind. Each one thinks differently. Each one can make independent decisions. This news disturbed the Velkari commanders. They could not imagine how a species could work together without sharing thoughts. How many worlds do they control? Asked Zethkari. Unknown, my queen. They appeared from empty space. Our scouts have found no trace of their homeworlds. Zethkari clicked her claws on the metal table. For 300 years, the Velkari had known exactly where every enemy came from. They had complete maps of coalition space. But these humans were ghosts. Gather the Grand Fleet, she ordered. 1,000 ships. We will crush them completely. Back on Sanctuary, the training continued. Slowly, the coalition soldiers began to learn. The Korvans started making decisions without orders. The Etherians found ways to fight that did not feel like murder to them. Even the proud Altarians learned to bend their rigid thinking. But the real change was happening in their minds. For 300 years, these species had been losing. They had been afraid. They had been running from world to world with no hope. Now they were learning something that humans had always known, that any individual could make a difference, that authority should be questioned, that diversity made them stronger, not weaker. Major Chris Taylor documented these changes from the front lines. He was a military reporter whose job was to record what happened during the war, but what he saw went beyond just fighting. Personal log, day 35, he spoke into his recorder. The changes in the coalition forces continue to amaze me. Yesterday, a Korvan sergeant disobeyed direct orders to save a squad of Etherian medics. 2 weeks ago, that same sergeant would have followed orders even if it meant watching allies die. Chris paused, watching a group of mixed-species soldiers sharing stories around a campfire. The humans are not just teaching them how to fight. They are teaching them how to think like free people instead of defeated slaves. Colonel Amy Stone joined the group around the fire. She had been working 18-hour days training soldiers, but she never showed how tired she was. "Colonel," said Captain Tor Ironpaw, "may I ask you something?" "Sure," Amy replied, sitting down next to the big Korvan. "Before you came, we always lost. We had better weapons than many species the Velkari conquered, but we still lost. Why?" Amy looked up at the stars. "Because you fought their kind of war. You tried to be more organized, more disciplined, more perfect than they were. But they had 300 years to perfect their system." She picked up a stick and drew patterns in the dirt. "Humans learned something different. We learned that perfect systems have perfect weaknesses, and the only way to beat perfection is with imperfection." The alien soldiers listened carefully. Many of them were starting to understand. "Tomorrow, we begin advanced training," Amy announced. "You are going to learn the most dangerous human military tactic of all." "What is that?" asked Lieutenant Moonwhisper. Amy smiled. "Improvisation." Captain Grace Butler moved quietly through the dark streets of New Corvin City. The planet had been under Velkari control for 2 years, and the occupation had changed everything. Where once there had been gardens and parks, now there were only gray buildings and work camps. Grace was 38 years old with black hair and sharp green eyes. She was not a soldier like most humans in the war. She was a diplomat, but her mission was more dangerous than any battle. Behind her, a small team of volunteers followed in the shadows. There was Darkfur, a Korvan resistance fighter whose family had been killed in the invasion. Next to him walked Silent Step, an Etherian who had learned to fight despite his people's peaceful nature. The team also included Brightstone, an Altarian engineer whose crystal city had been destroyed. "The safe house is ahead," whispered Darkfur. His yellow eyes glowed softly in the darkness. "But there are Velkari patrols every hour." Grace nodded. "Remember the plan. We get in, Deliver the message and get out. No fighting unless we have no choice. They moved closer to the building. It looked like any other worker housing block, but Grace knew that inside were the leaders of the local resistance, people who had been fighting the occupation with nothing but hope and determination. Commander Ryan Clark was already inside the building. He had arrived 3 days earlier through a different route. Ryan was a specialist in what humans called underground warfare, the art of fighting an enemy when you could not match their strength. "They are here," he whispered to the Corvin leader, an old female named Greymane. "The humans have come to help." Greymane had been fighting the Velkari for 2 years with nothing but captured weapons and clever tricks. Her people had been losing hope, but recently they had heard rumors, stories of human victories, tales of the impossible happening. Grace and her team slipped into the building through a hidden entrance. Inside, 30 resistance fighters waited in a basement room. They represented 5 different species, all united by their hatred of the occupiers. "I am Captain Grace Butler of the Human Liberation Force," Grace said quietly. "We are here to teach you how to win." An old Nexari engineer named Gearwright spoke up. His mechanical arm had been damaged in the invasion and never properly repaired. "Win? We have been trying to win for 2 years. The Velkari are too strong." "The Velkari are strong," Grace agreed. "But they have weaknesses, and we know how to exploit them." She gestured to Ryan, who stepped forward with a small device. When he activated it, pictures appeared on the wall. "This is how you have been fighting," Ryan said. The pictures showed resistance attacks, bombs in Velkari buildings, attacks on supply convoys, sabotage of communication centers. "Good work," he continued. "But you are only hurting their bodies. We are going to teach you how to hurt their minds." Grace took over. The Velkari rule through fear and through the belief that they cannot be beaten. But what happens when people stop being afraid? What happens when they start to believe that freedom is possible? She showed them new pictures. Humans teaching other species to fight. Coalition forces winning battles. Velkari ships retreating from human attacks. Across the galaxy, people are learning that the bugs can be beaten, Grace said. But the most important battles are not fought with ships and guns. They are fought in the hearts and minds of ordinary people. Over the next few hours, Grace and Ryan taught the resistance fighters new tactics, not just how to attack the enemy, but how to give hope to their own people. "Start small," Ryan explained. "Help families escape. Protect children. Show people that someone still cares about them." "Spread the word," Grace added. "Tell everyone about the human victories. Tell them about the coalition forces that are learning to fight back. Give them something to believe in." Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Helen Murphy was making a discovery that would change everything. Helen was a human anthropologist who studied how different cultures worked. She was small and quiet, with brown hair and thick glasses. For months, she had been studying captured Velkari soldiers. Most of them stayed connected to the hive mind even in prison, but a few had been cut off from their ships for so long that something strange was happening. "Subject 7 is showing individual behavior patterns," she reported to her research team. "He is making choices that are not directed by the collective." Dr. Murphy watched through a one-way window as the Velkari soldier moved around his cell. Instead of standing motionless like the others, this one was exploring. He touched the walls, examined the food, even tried to communicate with the guards. "Is he trying to escape?" asked her assistant, Dr. Jim Foster. "No," Helen said slowly. "I think he is trying to understand. For the first time in his life, he is thinking for himself." This was bigger than just one prisoner. If Velkari could learn to think independently, then the entire war could change. On the industrial world of Forge Prime, engineer Laura White was leading the most dangerous mission of the war. Laura was 35 years old with red hair and oil stains on her hands. She loved machines and had spent her whole career building things, but today she was trying to steal something. "The bio ship is in Docking Bay 7, reported Lieutenant Mike Torres through her radio. "Guards are light, but the ship itself might be alive." Velkari ships were not built like human or coalition vessels. They were grown like plants, with living metal and organic computers. No one had ever captured one intact. "Remember the plan?" Laura whispered to her team. We need that ship's memory core. It contains navigation data for the entire Velkari Empire. The team moved through the shipyard like ghosts. Around them, massive Velkari bioships sat in repair docks. The ships looked like giant insects, all curves and spikes. Some of them seemed to be breathing. "There," pointed Sergeant Dan Miller. "Bay 7. The ship was smaller than the others, but it was still the size of a building. Its surface was dark and wet, like the skin of some deep-sea creature. "Motion sensors show it is alive," reported the team's technical specialist, Private Lisa Wong. "But brain activity is minimal. It might be sleeping." Laura approached the ship carefully. On its side, she found what looked like a door, but it was sealed shut. She placed a small device against the surface. Human scientists had learned how to communicate with Velkari technology. The door slowly opened with a wet, organic sound. Inside, the ship was nothing like human vessels. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat. The floor felt soft under their feet. Everything was connected by tubes and wires that looked more like blood vessels than electronics. "The memory core should be at the center," Laura whispered. "But be careful. If this thing wakes up, we could be trapped inside." They moved deeper into the ship, following passages that curved and twisted like intestines. Finally, they reached a chamber where a large, brain-like organ sat in a pool of glowing liquid. "That is it," Laura said. "The ship's mind." But as she reached for the memory core, the ship began to wake up. The walls started pulsing faster, lights began to glow, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm started to sound. "Move fast," Laura ordered. She connected her extraction device to the brain-like organ. Data began flowing into human computers, terabytes of information about Velkari space. "Laura, we have company," reported Mike from outside the ship. "Velkari guards are coming." "Just a few more minutes," Laura replied, watching the data transfer. "I'm getting star charts, ship designs, even the location of their home worlds." But the Velkari were closing in. Laser fire began to hit the outside of the ship. "Time to go," Laura said, grabbing the extracted data. "Everyone out." They ran through the twisting passages as the ship continued to wake up. Behind them, they could hear wet, sliding sounds as the ship's defenses came online. They burst out of the bioship just as Velkari soldiers reached the docking bay. A firefight erupted, but the human team had what they came for. "This is it," Laura told Admiral Lisa Carter later, showing her the stolen data. Complete maps of Velkari space, ship movements, supply lines, and most important, the location of their capital world. Lisa studied the information with excitement. For the first time, humans could see the full scope of the Velkari Empire. It was bigger than they had imagined, but it also had weaknesses. "Look at this," she pointed to one section of the map. "Their home system is heavily defended, but the supply lines are thin. And here, most of their military forces are spread out across occupied worlds." Back on New Corvan City, Grace Butler's mission was having unexpected results. The resistance fighters had taken her lessons and improved on them. Instead of just attacking Velkari targets, they were helping their own people. Darkfur had organized a network to smuggle children out of work camps. Silent Step was teaching Etherian healing techniques to other species. Brightstone was building hidden communication devices that allowed families to stay in touch. But the most important change was in the people themselves. For 2 years, they had been afraid and hopeless. Now they were starting to believe that freedom was possible. "The Velkari are worried," reported Greymane during one of their meetings. "They are bringing in more soldiers. They are asking more questions. Something has changed." Grace smiled. "Fear works both ways. When people stop being afraid of you, you start being afraid of them." The change was spreading across the galaxy. On every occupied world, resistance movements were growing stronger. People who had given up were starting to fight back. And most importantly, they were learning to work together. Major Chris Taylor documented these changes in his reports. "Personal log, day 67, he recorded. "The war is no longer just about military victories. It has become something bigger. The humans have not just given the galaxy new weapons and tactics, they have given them something more dangerous, the belief that they deserve to be free." on the Velkari capital world of Zethkar, Queen Warrior. Zethkari was reading reports that made no sense to her. Rebellions were breaking out across the empire. Species that had been peaceful slaves for decades were suddenly fighting back. "Explain this," she demanded of her intelligence commander. "The humans, my queen, they are not just fighting our ships, they are spreading ideas, teaching our subjects to think like them." Zethkari clicked her claws in anger. Ideas were more dangerous than weapons. Weapons could be stopped by armor and shields, but ideas could spread like a virus through the minds of inferior species. "Double the guards on all occupied worlds," she ordered. "Execute anyone caught spreading human propaganda." But it was too late. The idea of freedom had already taken root, and unlike the Velkari's organized empire, ideas could not be controlled by force. Across the galaxy, billions of beings were learning the same lesson that Grace Butler had brought to New Corvin City. That freedom was not something given by rulers. It was something that belonged to everyone, and it was worth fighting for. The Velkari had conquered worlds and destroyed fleets, but they had never faced an enemy that could conquer hearts and minds, and for the first time in 300 years, their empire was beginning to crack. Admiral Jack Foster stood on the bridge of the Victory and looked at the largest fleet in galactic history. Around his flagship, over 2,000 ships stretched across space like a metal sea. Human vessels sailed alongside Corvin battleships, Etherian healing ships, Altarian crystal cruisers, and Nexari engineering platforms. Jack was 60 years old with white hair and tired blue eyes. He had been fighting for 3 years, ever since humanity revealed itself to the galaxy. Now, he was about to lead the final battle of the war. "Admiral," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Sue Miller. "All fleet commanders are ready. The approach to Zethkar is clear." Jack nodded. The Velkari homeworld lay ahead, a dark planet surrounded by more defenses than anyone had ever seen. But the galaxy's united fleet was ready. "Send the message to all ships," Jack ordered. "This is not about revenge. This is about freedom." Captain Nina Ross was already inside the enemy system, leading the most dangerous mission of the war. Nina was 32 years old with short brown hair and green eyes. She was the best infiltration specialist in the human fleet. Her team was small, but deadly. There was Tom Ironheart, a Corvin warrior who had learned human fighting techniques. Next to him floated Grace Lightbearer, an Etherian who had overcome her people's hatred of violence. The team also included Crystal Starsong, an Altarian whose psychic abilities could confuse enemy sensors. "The hive core is 3 kilometers below the surface," Nina whispered into her radio. "Security is heavy, but we have a path." The hive core was the biological computer that controlled all Velkari minds across the galaxy. If they could reach it, they could break the enemy's greatest strength, their perfect unity. Above the planet, the battle was already beginning. The Velkari had built massive space fortresses around their homeworld. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the fleets, but this time, the coalition forces fought differently. Instead of trying to match Velkari strength with strength, they used the tactics humans had taught them. Small groups attacked from many directions. Ships worked together without waiting for orders from commanders. Chaos replaced order. "Target their command ships," called out Captain Tony Garcia from his cruiser. Tony had been one of the human historians who studied Velkari tactics. Now he used that knowledge to predict their moves. The battle raged across the star system, but the real fight was happening on the planet below. Dr. Mark Johnson broadcast from a human ship, his voice reaching every Velkari on the planet. Mark was a psychologist who understood how minds worked. His words were designed to do something no one had ever tried before: make individual Velkari think for themselves. "Warriors of Zethkar," his voice echoed across the planet. "You have been told that you are perfect, that your way is the only way. But what if you could choose your own path? What if you could decide for yourself what is right and wrong?" In the hive core chamber, Queen Warrior Zethkari felt something she had never experienced before: doubt. The shared mind of her people was wavering. Some of her warriors were actually listening to the humans' words. "Impossible," she clicked. "We are one mind, one purpose, one will." But even as she spoke, she could feel individual thoughts breaking away from the collective. Velkari across the planet were starting to question, to wonder, to choose. Nina's team reached the entrance to the Hive Core facility. The underground complex was vast, filled with organic computers and living machines that pulsed with alien life. "Guards ahead," whispered Tom. His keen Corvan senses could detect enemies in the dark tunnels. "Let me try something," said Grace. The Etherean healer approached the Velkari guards with her hands raised. "We do not want to hurt you," she said gently. "We want to free you." The guards hesitated. Without the constant direction of the hive mind, they were confused. Some of them had never made an independent decision in their entire lives. "Free?" One of them clicked in the Velkari language. "What does this word mean?" "It means you can choose," Grace explained. "You can decide what you want to do with your life." Meanwhile, Commander Eve Parker was leading ground forces across the planet's surface. Eve was 35 years old with red hair and fierce determination. Her job was to liberate the massive slave camps that covered much of Zethkar. "Camp 7 is ahead," reported Sergeant Bill Wright. "Sensors show over 10,000 prisoners inside." Eve's heart was heavy as they approached the camp. Intelligence reports said there were hundreds of these facilities across the planet. Billions of beings from dozens of species, all enslaved by the Velkari Empire. The camp was surrounded by high walls and energy barriers, but the guards were distracted by the battle in space and the confusion spreading through the hive mind. "Remember," Eve told her soldiers, "many of these prisoners have been slaves for generations. They might be afraid of freedom." They broke through the camp's defenses and found scenes that would haunt them forever. Creatures from across the galaxy, reduced to skin and bones, working in conditions that barely kept them alive. But when the prisoners saw coalition soldiers, humans, Corvans, Etherians, and others working together, something amazing happened. For the first time in decades, they began to hope. Deep in the hive core chamber, Nina's team finally reached their target. The chamber was enormous, filled with a massive brain-like structure that pulsed with bioelectric energy. This was the source of the Velkari collective consciousness. "There," Nina pointed to a cluster of control nodes. "If we can disrupt those connections, the hive mind will collapse." But Queen Warrior Zethkari was waiting for them. The massive Velkari leader stood 12 feet tall, her purple armor gleaming in the chamber's organic light. "Humans," she hissed. "You have brought chaos to perfection. You have poisoned order with your madness." "We have brought choice," Nina replied, raising her weapon. "Something your people have never had." The battle in the chamber was fierce but brief. Zethkari was strong and fast, but she fought like all Velkari, predictably, following patterns that humans had studied for years. Nina and her team used the environment to their advantage, turning the chamber's own defenses against the Queen Warrior. When Zethkari finally fell, her last words were a question that showed how much had changed. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you not simply conquer us as we conquered others?" "Because," Nina said sadly, "conquest was never the point. Freedom was." With their queen dead and the hive core damaged, the Velkari collective consciousness began to break apart. Across the planet and throughout their empire, individual Velkari experienced independent thought for the first time in their species' history. Some went mad from the shock, others embraced their new freedom with joy. Many simply stood in confusion, not knowing what to do without orders from the hive mind. The battle in space ended as Velkari ships began to surrender or simply stopped fighting. Without the coordination of the collective, their perfect formations broke apart. President Alan Cooper addressed the galaxy from the bridge of his command ship. Alan was 55 years old with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been chosen to lead humanity not because he was the strongest or smartest, but because he understood what freedom really meant. "People of the galaxy," he broadcast on all frequencies, "the war is over. The Velkari Empire has fallen, but we are not here to take their place as your rulers." This announcement surprised many species. Throughout galactic history, the winner of a war always became the new empire. "Humanity offers you something different," Alan continued. "We offer you the chance to rule yourselves, to make your own choices, to build the kind of galaxy you want to live in." In the weeks that followed, liberation teams spread across former Velkari worlds. The scale of the Empire's crimes became clear. Entire species enslaved, worlds stripped of resources, billions of lives destroyed. But something wonderful also became clear. When given the chance, people chose freedom. Species that had been enemies worked together. Worlds that had been wastelands began to bloom again. Captain Alex Turner, now an old man with white hair and tired eyes, found himself teaching at the new Galactic Academy. His students came from dozens of species, all eager to learn about the galaxy's new future. Teacher Turner asked a young Velkari student named Freethinker, he had chosen the name himself, what made humans different? Why were you able to defeat an empire that conquered the galaxy? Alex smiled, remembering the same question from many years before. We were not stronger or smarter, he explained. We just believed in something that the Velkari could never understand. What was that? Asked another student, a small Etherian girl. We believe that anyone can make a difference, Alex said. That the most powerful force in the universe is not technology or numbers or unity. It is the simple idea that things can always be better, and that any person can be the one to make them so. Outside the classroom windows, the space station orbited a world that was rebuilding itself. Former enemies worked side by side, children of different species played together, and somewhere in the vast cosmos, other civilizations might be learning that no matter how dark things seem, there are always those willing to fight for something better. The Velkari Empire was gone, but its greatest lesson remained. No one has the right to rule over others without their consent. Freedom is not something that can be given or taken away. It belongs to everyone, and it is always worth fighting for. And in the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not new weapons or better ships, but the understanding that every individual has value. That diversity makes civilization stronger. That hope is more powerful than fear. The galaxy was free, and it would never forget who taught them what freedom truly meant.